The stranger rode into Dust Creek just as they were auctioning off a human being. He sat on his weathered horse, watching a young woman stand on a wooden crate while men shouted numbers like she was livestock. Her dress was torn, her face streaked with dirt, but her eyes burned with a defiance that made his chest tighten. Marcus had seen plenty of ugly things in his 32 years, but this hit different. The girl couldn't be more than 20, and the way she held her chin up despite everything told him she wasn't broken yet. The auctioneer, a fat man with tobacco-stained teeth, was getting impatient. "Come on. Gentlemen, Sarah here owes $300 on her father's gambling debt. Fine specimen, good for cooking, cleaning, whatever else you might need." The crowd of rough men laughed at the implication, and Marcus felt his jaw clench. The highest bid sat at $250 from a bearded man who kept licking his lips. Marcus had seen that look before. It never ended well for women. The girl's eyes darted around desperately, searching for something, anything that might save her. That's when she looked directly at him. For a moment, time stopped. She didn't beg with her eyes like he expected. Instead, she looked at him like she was trying to memorize his face, as if she knew something terrible was about to happen, and wanted to remember the last decent person she'd seen. Marcus touched the leather pouch hidden beneath his worn coat. Inside were enough gold coins to buy half the town, but nobody here knew that. To them, he was just another drifter with dust on his boots and holes in his shirt. He'd worked hard to look that way. The bearded man raised his hand again. "$275, he called out, grinning. Marcus had promised himself he'd stay invisible in this town. He had business to handle, people to avoid, and drawing attention was the last thing he needed. But watching this girl get sold to that animal was something he couldn't stomach. He nudged his horse forward, the crowd parting slightly. His hand moved to his coat. $500, he said quietly. The entire crowd went silent. The auctioneer's mouth fell open. Even the girl stared at him in shock. Did you say 500? The auctioneer stammered. Marcus nodded once, his eyes never leaving the girl's face. He saw confusion there now, mixed with the faintest spark of hope. The bearded man spun around, fury twisting his features. "Who the hell are you, boy?" Marcus finally looked at him. "Someone who's got $500. But as he reached for his gold, he noticed 3 men in the back of the crowd exchange meaningful glances. They'd recognized something about him. Maybe his horse, maybe his voice. His blood ran cold as he realized his biggest fear was about to come true. His past had just caught up with him in the worst possible moment. The gold coins hit the auctioneer's palm with a sound that silenced every whisper in the crowd. Marcus counted them out slowly, deliberately, while every eye in Dust Creek watched. $500 was more money than most of these men would see in 2 years. "Sold," the auctioneer declared, but his voice cracked with nervousness. Marcus dismounted and walked toward the platform. The girl, Sarah, stepped down from the crate with shaking legs. When he got close enough, he could see the fear she'd been hiding behind that defiant mask. "What's your name?" she whispered. "Marcus," he said simply, then turned to address the crowd. "Show's over, folks." But the 3 men from the back were pushing forward now, and Marcus's stomach dropped as he recognized the leader, Jake Morrison, a bounty hunter with a memory like a steel trap and morals like a snake. "Well, I'll be damned," Jake drawled, his hand resting on his gun. "Marcus Dalton, thought you were dead." The crowd stirred at the name. Some of them knew it. The Dalton family name carried weight in certain circles, though not the kind Marcus wanted attached to him right now. Sarah looked between them, sensing the danger crackling in the air. "What's happening?" Marcus kept his voice low. "Stay close to me. Don't say anything." Jake stepped closer, his 2 partners flanking him. "Boys, we got ourselves a genuine mystery here. See, Marcus Dalton is supposed to be broke. His daddy lost everything before he died, left young Marcus here with nothing but debt and shame." The bearded man who'd been bidding against Marcus perked up with interest. "Then where'd he get 500 in gold?" "That's what I'm wondering," Jake said, never taking his eyes off Marcus. "See, there's been talk about some missing railroad money, a lot of missing railroad money, and here's poor Marcus, supposedly broke as a church mouse, throwing around gold like it's pennies." Marcus felt Sarah tense beside him. She was smart enough to understand that whatever was happening, it was bigger than her debt and bigger than this auction. "You boys seem to have me confused with someone else," Marcus said calmly. "I'm just a drifter who happened to have some savings." Jake laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Savings? Boy, I know what you did to get that money. And I know there's a lot more where that came from. The crowd was getting restless now, sensing violence in the air. Marcus could feel them closing in, drawn by the smell of easy money and excitement. That's when Sarah did something unexpected. She stepped forward, putting herself partially between Marcus and Jake. "This man just bought my debt fair and square," she said, her voice stronger than Marcus expected. "If you have business with him, handle it somewhere else." Jake's eyes narrowed as he looked at her. "Lady, you don't know what you're mixed up in." "I know I'm mixed up with someone who just saved me from that animal," she said, nodding toward the bearded man. "That's enough for now." Marcus stared at her. This woman who'd been sold like cattle was standing up to armed men to defend a stranger. It was either the bravest or most foolish thing he'd ever seen. But Jake wasn't backing down. "Here's what's going to happen. You're coming with us, Marcus, and we're going to have a nice long talk about where you've been and what you've been doing." Marcus's hand moved toward his gun, but he stopped. There were too many people here, too much chaos. If shooting started, Sarah would be right in the middle of it. "I need time to get my affairs in order," Marcus said carefully. Jake grinned. "You got 1 hour. After that, we come looking." As the crowd began to disperse, Marcus realized his simple act of kindness had just painted a target on both their backs. And Sarah still had no idea that the man who'd saved her might be the most dangerous person in 3 states. Marcus led Sarah to the edge of town where his horse waited, his mind racing through options that all ended badly. The sun was climbing higher, and with each passing minute, Jake Morrison was probably gathering more men and more questions. "You need to leave," Marcus said, not looking at her. "Take this." He pressed $50 into her hand. "Get on the next stage out of here and don't look back." Sarah stared at the money, then at him. "You just spent $500 on me and now you're giving me more to leave? That doesn't make sense." "Nothing about this makes sense," Marcus muttered, checking his saddlebags. Inside, wrapped in oiled cloth, was enough stolen railroad money to hang him 10 times over. He'd been running with it for 3 months, trying to figure out how to return it without getting himself killed. "What did you steal?" Sarah asked quietly. Marcus froze. "What makes you think I stole anything?" "Because innocent men don't look the way you looked when that bounty hunter said your name. And they don't carry gold coins when they're dressed like drifters." She stepped closer. "And they don't save random women at auctions unless they understand what it feels like to be desperate." Marcus studied her face. There was intelligence there, sharper than he'd first realized. "You're too smart for your own good. Smart enough to know you're in real trouble. Smart enough to know that if you leave me here, Jake Morrison is going to use me to get to you." She was right, and they both knew it. Jake would grab her the moment Marcus rode out of town, use her as leverage to force him back. "The money belongs to the Central Pacific Railroad," Marcus said finally. "I didn't steal it exactly, but I didn't earn it either." "What does that mean?" Marcus looked toward the mountains where he'd hidden the rest of the fortune. "My father worked for the railroad before he died. He discovered some men were skimming money from worker wages, selling supplies that never existed, keeping double books. When he tried to report it, they had him killed." Sarah's eyes widened. "So you took their money?" "I took evidence. The money was part of it. I've been trying to figure out how to expose them without getting myself hanged for theft." "How much money are we talking about?" Marcus hesitated. "Enough to buy this entire town twice over." Before Sarah could respond, the sound of approaching horses made them both turn. Jake Morrison was riding hard toward them with 6 men behind him, and they weren't coming to talk. "They're not waiting an hour," Sarah said. Marcus grabbed her arm. "Can you ride?" "Well enough. Then we're leaving. Now." He helped her onto his horse behind him, but as they prepared to flee, Jake's voice rang out across the distance. "Marcus Dalton, we know about the railroad money. We know about the hideout in Devil's Canyon." Marcus's blood turned to ice. If Jake knew about Devil's Canyon, then someone had been watching him for weeks. Someone had followed him to his cache. "We also know about your father's journal," Jake shouted. "The one with all the names." Sarah felt Marcus go rigid in front of her. "What journal?" she whispered. But Marcus was staring at the approaching riders with a look of absolute horror. "They don't just want the money," he said quietly. "They want to bury the truth about what happened to my father, and everyone who knows about it, including her." Marcus spurred his horse hard, racing through the narrow canyon trail with Sarah clinging to his back. Behind them, the thunder of pursuing hooves echoed off the rock walls. Jake Morrison and his men were closing the distance fast. "Where are we going?" Sarah shouted over the wind. Somewhere they can't follow with horses, Marcus called back, guiding them up a treacherous rocky slope that would challenge even his experienced mount. As they climbed higher, Sarah caught glimpses of their pursuers below. There's more of them now, Marcus had noticed too. What started as 6 riders had become at least 12. Word was spreading fast, and every bounty hunter and opportunist in the territory would be drawn by the promise of railroad gold. They reached a narrow ledge where Marcus finally stopped, his horse blowing hard. From here they could see the entire valley below, and what Sarah saw made her gasp. "Sweet Jesus," she whispered. The trail behind them was filling with riders, not just Jake's men, but what looked like a small army converging on their position. Some were coming from Dust Creek, others from different directions entirely. "You said your father had a journal," Sarah said, catching her breath. "What was in it?" Marcus pulled out a leather-bound book from his saddlebag, its pages worn and stained. Names, dates, every crooked deal, every stolen shipment, every murdered witness. 3 years of documentation. Sarah opened it carefully, scanning the pages. Her face went pale. "These names, some of these are government officials, judges, sheriffs. Now you understand why they want it buried. And why they want us dead." Sarah looked up at him. "The railroad money was never the real prize, was it? The money was just my father's way of getting their attention. He knew they'd come after anyone who had it. He wanted them to reveal themselves. By using you as bait." Marcus nodded grimly. "Except I don't think he expected it to take 3 years, or for me to drag an innocent woman into it." A rifle shot cracked through the air, the bullet striking the rock inches from Marcus's head. The riders below had gotten close enough to start shooting. "We need to move," Marcus said, but as he looked around he realized their options had just run out. The trail ahead was blocked by fallen rocks, and behind them was a 40-foot drop to jagged stones. Sarah was studying the journal again. "Marcus, look at this entry from 2 weeks before your father died." She showed him a page that made his face go white. "He met with someone from the railroad company, someone who promised to help him expose the corruption. That's impossible. The railroad wanted him dead, not the railroad. Look at the name." Marcus read the entry again, his hands shaking. The meeting had been with James Morrison, Jake's older brother, who worked as a railroad investigator. "Jake's been hunting me for the people who killed his own brother." Sarah stared at him. "He doesn't know." Another shot rang out, closer this time. Jake's voice echoed up from below. "Marcus, send down the journal and we'll let the woman live." Marcus looked at Sarah, then at the journal, then at the approaching army of men who would kill them both the moment they had what they wanted. "There's something else," Sarah said quietly, still reading. "Your father didn't just document the corruption. He found out where they're keeping the rest of the stolen money. Millions of dollars." Marcus looked at her. "Where?" "Dust Creek. Hidden right under everyone's noses." The irony hit him like a physical blow. The fortune that could expose the entire conspiracy was sitting in the same town where they'd started this nightmare. But as more shots began to pepper the rocks around them, Marcus realized they might never live long enough to use that information. Jake's men were climbing the slope now, and there was nowhere left to run. "Sarah," Marcus said quietly, "I need you to know something. Whatever happens next, buying your freedom was the first decent thing I've done in 3 years. Then let's make sure it wasn't the last," she said, checking the pistol she'd taken from his saddlebag. "If you're enjoying this story, hit that subscribe button. There's so much more where this came from." The standoff lasted exactly 30 seconds before everything went to hell. Marcus heard the whistle of an arrow just before it buried itself in his horse's neck. The animal screamed and reared, throwing both riders to the hard ground. Sarah rolled behind a boulder as bullets began chipping stone all around them. "Indians!" someone shouted from below, and Marcus realized their situation had just gotten impossibly worse. A war party of 6 Apache warriors had appeared on the opposite ridge, pinning Jake's men between 2 forces. But these weren't random raiders. Marcus recognized their leader, a scarred warrior named Crow Feather, who had good reason to hate anyone connected to the railroad. The Apache had lost family to a railroad massacre 2 years ago, a massacre that Marcus's father had documented in his journal. "They're not here for us," Marcus told Sarah as he pulled her behind better cover. "They want Jake's men." "How do you know?" "Because I gave Crow Feather's people information about the men who killed his family. He's been hunting the same corrupt officials we are." The battle below erupted in chaos. Jake's men found themselves caught in crossfire between the Apache warriors and the steep canyon walls. Marcus watched as 3 bounty hunters fell in the first exchange of gunfire. But Jake Morrison was smarter than his men. Instead of fighting the Apache, he was climbing directly toward Marcus and Sarah's position with 2 of his best shooters. "He's coming for the journal," Sarah said, leveling her pistol. "Let him come," Marcus replied, but his voice carried a weight Sarah hadn't heard before. When Jake's head appeared over the rocky ledge, Marcus was waiting for him. "Hello, Jake. Give me the journal, Marcus. This ends here." "Does it?" "Because I've got something to tell you about your brother James." Jake's face twisted with rage. "Don't you dare speak his name. You got him killed with your father's crusade. Your brother was trying to help my father expose the corruption. The men who killed him are the same ones paying you to hunt me down. You're lying." Marcus held up the journal, open to a specific page. "Read it yourself. James Morrison, railroad investigator, secretly gathering evidence to support William Dalton's claims. Killed 3 days after this meeting." Jake's gun wavered as he read his brother's name, written in careful script with details about their clandestine cooperation. "They played us against each other," Marcus continued. "While you were hunting me for revenge, the real killers were getting rich off the chaos." The Apache war cries grew closer. Jake's remaining men were breaking, running for their horses. "There's more," Sarah called out, reading from another page. "The man who ordered both murders. He's the sheriff in Dust Creek, the same one who probably told you where to find Marcus." Jake's face went pale as the pieces fell into place. "Sheriff Crawford. He's been using you to clean up loose ends," Marcus said. "And when you brought him the journal, he would have killed you too." An Apache arrow whistled past Jake's ear, reminding all of them that their real enemies were still closing in. "The corruption runs deeper than just stolen money," Sarah said, still reading. "They're planning to frame the Apache for a massacre that will justify seizing their land for railroad expansion." Jake stared at the journal, then at Marcus, and, "If this is true, then we need to get back to Dust Creek alive," Marcus finished, "before Crawford realizes his plan is falling apart." But as they looked down at the canyon floor, they could see Crawford's riders already racing back toward town. The unlikely alliance between Marcus, Sarah, and Jake Morrison lasted exactly as long as it took them to realize Sheriff Crawford wasn't just fleeing. He was preparing for war. Smoke was rising from Dust Creek as they approached the town in the dying afternoon light. But it wasn't the smoke of cooking fires or forge work. Buildings were burning, and the streets were filled with armed men who definitely weren't locals. "Crawford's brought in hired guns," Jake said, studying the scene through Marcus's spyglass. "At least 20 of them. He's destroying evidence," Sarah realized. "Look, they're burning the bank, the land office, anywhere records might be kept." Marcus felt sick as he watched his father's 3-year investigation literally going up in smoke. Every document, every witness, every piece of proof was being systematically eliminated. "There," Sarah pointed to a group of men dragging someone from the hotel. "They've got prisoners." Through the spyglass, Marcus could see the auctioneer from that morning being forced into the jail at gunpoint. The man who'd sold Sarah was now Crawford's liability, probably because he'd witnessed Marcus's unusual wealth and could identify him. "They're killing everyone who was at the auction," Jake said grimly. "Anyone who saw Marcus spend that money. Anyone who heard the names mentioned." The bearded man who'd been bidding against Marcus lay dead in the street. "This is my fault," Marcus said. "I should have stayed hidden." "No," Sarah said firmly. "This started long before today. Your father knew this moment would come. That's why he left you the journal." She was right, but it didn't make watching innocent people die any easier. Crowfeather appeared beside them like a ghost, his war paint fresh with blood. "The corrupt ones burn the truth," he said in careful English. "But fire cannot burn what lives in memory." "What are you saying?" Marcus asked. "Your father promised to tell the world what happened to my people, the railroad men who ordered the massacre of my village. They are in that town." "Crawford?" "Crawford gives orders, but the man who pays him comes tonight." Marcus felt his blood freeze. "Who? The one you call Morrison?" Jake stared at the Apache warrior. "That's impossible. Morrison is my family name, not your brother, the older one, the one who owns the railroad." Sarah grabbed the journal, frantically searching through pages. "Here," she said, her voice shaking. "Theodore Morrison, railroad executive. Your father met with him 6 months before he died." Jake's face went white as he read the entry. "Uncle Theodore. He's the one who told me Marcus killed James. He's the one who's been paying me to hunt him. He sent you after Marcus to stop him from exposing the truth about James's murder, Sarah realized. A murder he ordered. The sound of approaching riders made them all look toward town. A luxury carriage was arriving, escorted by more armed men. Theodore Morrison, Jake whispered, and Marcus could hear 20 years of betrayal in his voice. He's coming to make sure the job is finished, Marcus said. To see the journal burned and us dead. Then let's not disappoint him, Sarah said, checking her ammunition. But as they prepared to ride into town, Crow Feather held up his hand. The Apache have a saying, the snake is most dangerous when cornered. He was right. Theodore Morrison hadn't survived 30 years in the railroad business by being careless. Whatever was waiting for them in Dust Creek would be designed to eliminate every threat to his empire. There's something else, Sarah said, reading from the journal's final pages. Your father hid a second copy of everything. Insurance, he called it. Where? With someone in Dust Creek. Someone Theodore Morrison would never suspect. Marcus looked at the burning town, then at his unlikely companions. Somewhere in that inferno was the key to exposing decades of corruption and murder. Who? Jake demanded. Who has the second copy? Sarah looked up from the journal, her face pale. The priest. They all stared toward town, where the church bell tower rose above the smoke. And that's when they realized the church wasn't burning. It was the one building Crawford's men were protecting. The church stood like a fortress in the center of Dust Creek, surrounded by Theodore Morrison's hired guns. But Marcus knew something they didn't. Every church had a back door for the priest's private quarters, and his father had shown him that entrance years ago. You're insane, Jake whispered as Marcus outlined his plan. Even if we get inside, Morrison has 20 men out there. 21, Sarah corrected, watching another rider join the group. But they're all watching the front door. Crow Feather studied the layout with tactical precision. My warriors can create distraction. Draw them away from the building. Why would you help us? Jake asked, still struggling to trust anyone. Because when the truth comes out, my people get justice for our massacred children. As darkness fell, Marcus felt the weight of 3 years pressing down on him. Everything his father had died for came down to the next hour. They moved through the shadows like ghosts. Crow Feather's warriors struck first, attacking the hotel where Theodore Morrison waited. The hired guns rushed toward the gunfire, leaving only 3 men watching the church. Marcus, Sarah, and Jake slipped through the priest's garden and found Father Miguel waiting for them in his study. The old man's eyes were sad, but determined. I've been expecting you for months, he said, pulling a wooden box from beneath his altar. Your father was very thorough. Inside the box were detailed copies of every document, plus signed affidavits from witnesses Marcus thought were dead, and photographs of mass graves where Theodore Morrison had buried his problems. This is enough to hang half the territorial government, Jake breathed. More than enough, Father Miguel agreed. But Theodore Morrison is outside with enough firepower to ensure these documents never see daylight. That's when Sarah spotted something else in the box. A map showing the location of the main stolen funds cache, hidden beneath Dust Creek's own bank. He's been hiding millions of dollars right under everyone's noses, she said. Enough money to prove every theft, bribe, and murder. The sound of breaking glass interrupted them. Morrison's men had realized where they were. Father, is there another way out? Marcus asked. The bell tower, but it's a long drop to the ground. As boots thundered up the church steps, Marcus made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. Jake, take Sarah and the documents. Get them to the territorial capital. What about you? I'm done running. Marcus walked out the front door of the church with his hands empty but his head high. Theodore Morrison stood waiting with a dozen guns pointed at the building. Hello, Uncle, Jake called out, emerging behind Marcus with the documents held high. Surprised to see me alive? Theodore Morrison's face went through several expressions before settling on cold calculation. Jacob, I was told you were dead. Just like you told me Marcus killed James? The old man's silence confirmed everything. In the end, it wasn't bullets that brought down Theodore Morrison's empire. It was the sight of his own nephew reading his brother's real last words to a crowd of angry townspeople who had lost friends to his greed. The railroad money was returned. The Apache got their justice, and Sarah never had to worry about being sold again. Marcus kept one promise to his father. The truth finally came out. As for the strange cowboy who'd seemed like just another drifter, he used his share of the recovered funds to buy a ranch, where Sarah helped him raise horses and build a life worth the price his father had paid for it. If you're enjoying this story, hit that subscribe button. There's so much more where this came from.